Hello, welcome to Discovery Days. It's all online this time, so you'll be watching little films and activities going on over the 3 days. I would have been giving a talk in number 28 on the Marketplace, fantastic venue, but instead I've turned it into a little film about processions and parades around Belper, and I hope you'll enjoy the photographs and the little talk that I give as we go through them. Thanks for watching. Belper on parade. Like many towns, Belper has seen plenty of parades over the centuries, although not so many in recent years. The earliest image we have of a Belper procession is this one from 1875, showing a massive Friendly Society banner being held aloft with a band behind at the bottom of King Street. One procession you'd be sure to see in Belper in those days would be during Circus Week, when all the acts, including animals, were trooped around the town before descending on the big top, usually down Derwent Street, or Eyes Lane as it was known for most of the 19th century. You can see an elephant and 2 camels being ridden through the marketplace here around 1898. On a later occasion, some Belper lads tried to kidnap one of the elephants, and on the Church Lane, Chesterfield Road junction, they knocked the elephant's handler off his perch and tried to pull the elephant away up Chesterfield Road. The elephant was having none of it and helped the handler back up, at which point the boys ran off and the elephant and handler were able to continue on the parade down Church Lane. Here's another circus parade, with lions and exotic birds coming through the marketplace. The Edwards and Lennox shop is unrecognisable today. It now houses the Oriental Villa Takeaway. There were homegrown parades as well, with Belper Carnival processions in which people processed on foot, on bicycles, or, in this case, on ponies to take part. Fancy dress was popular, although you can't help wondering what kind of paint was used to put spots on the pony back in those days. One popular procession was in Wakes Week, when the people of Belper celebrated the patronal festival of St. Peter, from whom the parish church was named. Here, the banner showing the keys of St. Peter is being carried along New Road as part of the procession around the town. The festival continued to be popular and well attended, both by participants and onlookers, well into the 20th century. Here, in 1930, children in their best Sunday clothes and clutching baskets of fresh flowers are waiting to take part in the traditional march around the town. This is the same year, with the band all set to play at the bottom of Chesterfield Road. Spot the old horse and trumpet behind them on the right. It had closed 10 years earlier. And here they are, in the Memorial Gardens, with the St. Peter's Church banner having carried it around the town streets. You can see behind them Green Hall, a former home to the Strutt family, who owned the town's mills. Scout parades have been a familiar sight in Belper for a century now. Here's one between the wars coming down Lander Lane from the Butts, with the old Haynes shop on the right. The first major parade after the First World War was for the peace celebrations in July 1919. After a huge gathering in the parks, children were processed back to their Sunday school rooms around the town for a slap-up tea. Here's the start of the procession at the bottom of King Street, where the children of Christ Church and the Baptist Church would head off in one direction and the Trinity Methodists would go the other. The flags are flying outside the palace, the picture house and music hall on the right. Church parades weren't confined to just the town centre. Here's one at Openwood Gate, turning into Openwood Road. There's the Hop Inn in the distance. But it was the advent of the carnivals which saw parades grow and grow as the 20th century progressed, with lots of dressing up and brightly dressed bicycles, carts and later, lorries. As soon as the First World War was over, thoughts turned to raising funds for the new League of Nations to help ensure a lasting peace. Here in the River Gardens are some of the mill workers dressed as the nations of the world to promote the cause in about 1920. In those days, a king and queen of the carnival were chosen, and here are 2 of the earliest, on a float with their attendants and jester. One year the king's crown fell off as the float turned into King Street, and it had to be rescued for him from the gutter. By the end of the 1920s, people's thoughts were less on world peace and more on the town's hospitals. At the same time, the carnival seemed to have a bit of a revamp, with a crowning ceremony for the Carnival Princess at the Ritz before a march up to the marketplace with her attendants. Once they reached the coppice, they'd get on a float which would head the parade around the town. In 1935, the format was tweaked again, And that year, the town's largest employer, the English Sewing Cotton Company, was asked to choose a queen, a cotton queen, from within its female staff. The company used it as an opportunity to promote their fine threads to the thousands of onlookers. In 1936, it was George Brettle and Company's turn to choose, this time a hosiery queen, with an Elizabethan-style dress and a float showing various types of hosiery, including 2 legs jutting up in the air at the front of the lorry. Here, in 1938, it was the turn of Flanders, another hosiery company, who chose the Carnival Queen. They went for a Hawaiian theme, which was probably better than trying to compete with the fine but expensive outfits created by the bigger companies. The procession grew and grew, with competitions for the best dressed floats. Different departments of the Belper mills would compete, although not all would have access to a full-size lorry, so some improvising had to be made. You can get a lot on the back of a van, if you know how. Others would use a horse and cart to take part in the parade. The whole town got involved, with floats and costumes to prepare for the big day. There were prizes for the best costumes, with children's and adults categories, and lots of ideas for outfits, including these Pierrots, although the patriotic clown behind them looks a little creepy. These young ladies were on a Women Through the Ages float in 1937 and include entrants dressed as the suffragette and aviator Amy Johnson. Throughout much of the 1930s, a familiar sight in the Belper Carnival parades were the boat-themed creations of Neslin Beaver, built around the chassis of his 1927 Austin 7. Can you see the boy holding the ship's wheel? That's his son David, who would sit on Neslin's shoulders each year and shout out instructions as to which direction his father should drive in. This was Neslin's first creation, called Wild Duck, coming past the Memorial Gardens in 1931. David was only small at this stage, but still had responsibility for shouting out directions to his dad as he looked through the porthole. All those crowds, and they never knew the boat was being driven by someone who couldn't see what was happening. Here's Neslin's battleship from a later year, still relying on that important porthole for David to give instructions. And this is his trusty Austin 7, as it looked for the rest of the year when it could travel safely and incognito around the town centre. It helped Neslin win first prize in several carnival parades. Of course, there were lots of types of entries in the parade. Bicycle-based ones were popular for many years, such as this one passing Cooper's Butchers and the Lion Hotel on Bridge Street. In 1935, there was a rather special procession through the town. It was the Silver Jubilee of King George V, and following a proclamation from the fire escape at the South Mill, these members of the Belper United Band led a procession up to the marketplace. Here, they're passing Green Hall on King Street, where the gardens provided a perfect viewing area. There was a strong military presence in the procession. Here they are turning out of King Street and into the marketplace. They were met by 2,716 Sunday school children and just as many adults for the singing of patriotic songs accompanied by the band. Can you spot the Marketplace Memorial near the top right-hand corner of the photograph? The St. Peter's patronal processions continued after the Second World War. Here are the choir walking down Chesterfield Road behind the banner. You can just see some of the old houses on Shortlands to the right. They were demolished in 1967 and a car park created. The Sunday school membership was substantial, so the procession could be quite long. Everyone in their Sunday best carrying baskets or bunches of flowers. Here they all are, lined up on King Street, waiting to start off. Can you see the British Traders sign on what was Hunter's grocery shop on the Strut Street junction? And here are some of the girls with their baskets of flowers outside St. Peter's on arrival in June 1948. Before and after the Second World War, another feature of the Belper Carnivals were the Belper Burythmics, sometimes known as the Umtaggers, a prize-winning marching band. In those days, there were marching band competitions across the region, and time and again, the Umtaggers would bring cups and shields back to Belper. Here they are, practising their routine. They were known as the Umtaggers because they reckoned that the noise they made as they practised sounded something like Umtagger, Umtagger, Umtagger. As the hometown's band, the Umtaggers would lead a parade from the marketplace to the carnival field on the meadows.
Other bands would lead parades from further out of town. Here's one band leading the parade from Belper Lane as they turn into Bridge Street at the Triangle. Here's the crowd gathering in the marketplace in 1951, waiting to watch the procession down King Street. 2 years later, this is the procession heading down King Street, again watched by quite a crowd. Dewhurst the Butcher's on the right was later demolished and replaced with the Job Centre building. Same year, and here we're on the Carnival field as one of the bands arrives. Of course, 1953 was before the demolition of many of the mill buildings, which you can see in the background. As in the past, an important part of the Carnival processions was the presence of the Carnival Queen and her attendants, seen here arriving on the field. And here's one of the marching bands leaving at the end of the day. Interestingly, it's a Capechi's ice cream van on the field rather than Belper's better-known Mazza's. You needed some very fine throwing skills to be able to take the lead in these processions, as you can see. And they started them very young as well, by the look of it. The vehicles in the processions were as diverse and bizarre after the war as they had been before. Here's a mocked-up aeroplane making its way along Nottingham Road. In the same procession around the town were these ladies from the English Sewing Cotton Company, passing number 112 Nottingham Road. And a familiar sight in the 1950s was this lorry, designed to be a mobile throne for the Carnival Queen and her attendants, although it must have been quite old as it started with a crank handle. It's seen here passing along Lander Lane from Shortlands. As parades reached the bottom of King Street, the A6 traffic would stop to allow the march along Bridge Street and onto the field. Before 1963, of course, they'd passed the old Palace Cinema. Over time, that, then Leslie's Cafe, and then Woolworths have all gone from King Street. This merry band are turning the same corner later in the 1950s. There are plenty out, including those standing in the middle of the A6. You don't get a chance to do that very often. When the Palace Cinema was demolished, it was replaced with Belper's first supermarket, Vine Fair. The opening ceremony in October 1963 included another parade, this time by the Dagenham Girl Pipers, who marched down King Street before cutting the ribbon to open the new store. Here's a procession unique to the 1960s, with the chairman of Belper Urban District Council, Cyril Maskery, part of a procession along the Fleet to the well-dressing at the bottom of Bayard's Field, later Morley's Field. Marion Robson resurrected the well-dressings throughout the decade. One constant across the years has been the St George's Day parades by scouts and guides in the town. As you can see, in the 1960s, the procession began from the car park at the Belper Mills, with first one row, and then another, marching off into town. From the same year, 1967, are these photographs of the August Carnival Parade with floats on the butts heading off to the field at Openwood Gate. Carnaby Street was a great theme for a 1960s float. And as always, there was the Carnival Queen and her attendants. Carnivals continued through the 1970s and 80s, and the floats became more and more ambitious. Particularly noteworthy were the efforts of George Street. Here they are coming up King Street as Crusaders, complete with a lorry-shaped castle. In 1980, their theme was ancient Egypt. The following year, the wedding of Charles and Diana encouraged Belper to have their own royal coach. The same year saw lots of individual fancy dress entrants here on Derwent Street ready for the off. Everyone was heading off to the showground for the usual entertainments, including the marching bands. And of course, in those days, Thorntons were a big presence in the town, celebrating their 70th anniversary that year with a celebratory float. The procession was a particularly good one, with lots of families and children getting involved in the march across town. Here's the same group, called the Deb All-Stars, on the march down to the field. From the bottom of Spencer Road, you had a great view of the approaching parade. Deb, like Thornton's, was still a big presence in the town, and you can see the factory was still there on the left. Deb didn't just enter Belper's Carnival Parade, they won Best Float at Ambergate Carnival as well, in 1972. It was a good use of colour, and little devils. 1984, and here's the parade coming up King Street with the Belper Sports Centre float celebrating its 10th anniversary. Belper News photographer Keith Bird took this shot from the office window when it was based above the Royal Bank of Scotland. In 1991, it was Pottery School with their Robin Hood theme who stole the show and came away with first prize. Sadly, as the 1990s gave way to the 21st century, carnivals, with their parades, became a thing of the past. And then, in 2019, Pride in Belper was formed and a parade planned for the town, bringing a splash of colour to King Street not seen in years. People gathered in the marketplace first, before marching down King Street, a huge throng of people all coming together in an inclusive celebration of the wonderful diversity of life in Belper. It was great to see people of all ages not only taking part but gathering along King Street to watch the parade go by as it had done decades before. It all ended in the Memorial Gardens with a massive celebration. Jim Bell captured the day with some great photographs. As with everything else, in 2020 there was no physical Pride Parade, or strut as we like to call it in Belper. But it'll be back in 2021. Fresh and new, but with a strong link to the traditional parades of the past. I'll be there. Will you?